Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our Keys to Living and Aging Well Nutrition webinar. I'm Grace Smith, Executive Director of Age Well Middle Tennessee, and I'm delighted that you have joined us today. We want to start today's webinar by thanking our partners, the Greater Nashville Regional Council, the YMCA of Middle Tennessee, and Jewish Family Service. And I also want to thank our sponsors for the webinar. GNRC is a sponsor for the entire Keys to Living and Aging Well webinar series. And we have two sponsors of today's webinar, Ascension St. Thomas and Kroger. So thank you so much to our sponsors for making today's program possible. I'm delighted to introduce you to our three excellent panelists for today. We are fortunate to have all of them. And Natalie Barnett will start off our presentation. Natalie is a registered dietitian with the YMCA of Middle Tennessee, and she is going to provide a helpful overview with evidence-based information about what diets we should follow, what tips we need to keep in mind, how our bodies change as we age, and how that may affect our nutritional requirements. So Natalie, we're looking forward to hearing from you. After Natalie, we'll hear from Amanda Myers, who is with Ascension St. Thomas Rutherford. And Amanda is going to bring an interesting perspective, helping us think about perhaps what we've inherited from our families, both in terms of genetic predisposition or risk factors, but also the ways we think about food and approach eating. She's also going to help us recognize what might be disordered ways of thinking about food and some healthier ways of approaching food and just how we live in order to age well. And then Audrey Hall will share her personal story. Audrey is a retired nurse and also an Age Well volunteer. And we look forward to hearing her share her personal story and things she's learned in life about eating well to age well. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Natalie and we'll get started.
Thank you, Grace. I am so happy to be here. Just a little background about me before we get started, so you know why I'm qualified to tell you all of these things I'm getting ready to tell you. I'm a registered dietitian. I work for the YMCA in Middle Tennessee. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in clinical nutrition, both from East Tennessee State University. I am registered with the Commission on Dietetic Registration and licensed in Tennessee. I did 2 years of long-term care work, and then I started with the YMCA in February 2020. And next slide, please. I keep trying to do it myself, sorry. So we'll start talking about the MIND diet. I'm going to give an overview, talking about foods to emphasize and foods to maybe limit a little more. Then we're going to talk about specific nutrients and brain health and what nutrients we need to focus on for our brains. Then we're going to compare the MIND diet to both the Mediterranean and the DASH diet just briefly. You'll see why I say briefly in just a second. The macronutrients is the next section. We're going to give an overview of that and then talk about how those needs change as we age, because we don't need the same balance of the three macros as we throughout our whole life as we age. So that changes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about nutrients of concern. So as we get older, there are a few nutrients that we kind of need to focus on a little more. And then to round that out, we're going to talk very briefly at the end about supplements. I always say food first, and most dietitians will probably agree with me, but it's not always possible to get all of your nutrients from food if you have a specific diet or allergies. So how are we going to be able to choose supplements wisely? So next slide, please. Diving right in to the MIND diet. So it is a mixture of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. So like I said, we'll briefly compare all of those at the end of this section. But it is called the Mediterranean DASH intervention or neurodegenerative delay. So that's where the M, I, N, and D come from. Martha Claire Morris kind of coined this life eating pattern. I don't really even like to use the word diet for this one because it's kind of more of just it's just a set of, these are foods that we should emphasize and these are foods that you're going to want to limit a little more. It was created to help slow brain aging and prevent dementia and cognitive decline as we age. Research does show that even just moderately following these set of, it says no set of guidelines, moderately following these foods that they emphasize has a linked to a risk of lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. So next slide, please. So there are 10 foods that they kind of emphasize. The first of those is green leafy vegetables. They say 6 or more servings a week. And then we'll talk kind of about what vitamin E and flavonoids and all of those things are in just a minute, but just know that green leafy vegetables are full of those, as well as folate and carotenoids. The second one is all other vegetables, at least once a day. Non-starchy preferably, for higher nutrient content and fiber content. Those are going to be, cauliflower, broccoli, carrots, that kind of thing. Third up is berries. If anybody ever asks me what is a brain healthy food, the first thing I say is berries. The second thing I say is nuts. And that's because berries are full of flavonoids as well. So they recommend at least twice a week. Nuts, like I mentioned a second ago, 5 or more servings a week. So just a handful here or there, put them in a smoothie, put them on a salad, preferably not one that's loaded with sodium, just because that's going to over time contribute to negative heart health as well, and negative impacts on your blood pressure. So something low sodium, unsalted, raw ones. You could even roast your own in the oven. Those are really good. And those are going to be full of vitamin E. The fifth thing that they emphasize is olive oil to be your main cooking oil. So extra virgin olive oil is kind of the standard there. And you want to get one in an opaque or dark glass bottle. That's just going to prevent degradation by sunlight, temperature, and all of that. Next slide, please. The sixth thing is whole grains, at least 3 servings a day. So oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, whole wheat breads, pastas, even popcorn is a whole grain. Just make sure it's not loaded with movie theater butter and sodium all the time. I mean, every once in a while is okay, but that is a good snack that's a whole grain as well. The third thing I always say about brain health besides nuts and berries is fish. So fish, they recommend at least once a week, specifically fatty fish for the omega-3 content. Not everyone likes fish though, so we will talk about supplements at the end, and you can always take a fish oil pill if you're not really keen on things that swim. I have some people say that phrase a lot. But the fatty fish are salmon, tuna, herring, trout, mackerel, and sardines. So salmon is usually the most common of those, but try some of the other ones and see if you like them. Beans is one of our next ones, at least 4 servings a week. All beans, lentils, and soybeans are included in this. They also can be a plant-based protein if you don't like to eat meat, or if you just want to cut back on meat. So poultry is the next one. They recommend at least twice a week if you are a meat eater. There are a lot of people becoming vegetarians and vegans, so that's why I say if you are a meat eater. Those include turkey, chicken, and duck. And then last but not least, wine. No more than a glass a day, but red or white, they can definitely help prevent Alzheimer's and cognitive delay. The resveratrol, specifically in red wine, is kind of the key, but it says red or white is fine. Now that we've talked about foods to emphasize, let's talk about some foods to maybe limit a little bit more. So butter and margarine, less than a tablespoon a day. If you still want, your bread with some oil type substance on it, you can always just create like a mixture of oil with some herbs and dip it in it. I know some restaurants kind of have that at the table, and it's quite nice if you like that sort of thing. Cheese, they recommend less than once a week. Red meat, no more than 3 servings a week. So beef, pork, lamb, veal, that kind of thing. Fried foods, less than once a week. So that's going to be a lot of foods from fast food restaurants, but also you can fry foods at home. If you like doing that, I recommend doing an air fryer because it's going to be a lot less oil. So there are other options that you can do to lower your fried food intake. And then pastries and sweets, no more than 4 servings a week. I always like to say in this section that we're all human and we all probably are gonna have some pastries and sweets, but just kind of making sure that we're eating some of the more nutrient dense foods as well. So all of these things contain saturated and trans fats, and that's kind of why they want us to recommend, or they recommend for us to cut back on those. So based on the things that I talked about at the beginning, the foods to emphasize, we talked a lot about vitamin E, that can decrease oxidative stress. Omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. Flavonoids are also anti-inflammatory. You're seeing a pattern here. Anti-inflammatory is kind of the key to brain health. And a lot of the foods that we just talked about that they want us to kind of limit a little more are going to promote inflammation. Red meat and those kind of saturated fats are going to promote inflammation. So really the main key is just focusing on things that are going to lower your inflammation. Antioxidants also do that. So vitamin E, omega-3s, flavonoids, and resveratrol are kind of the nutrients to take away from all of those things that we just talked about. Next slide. Okay, and so I'm going to compare the MIND, the Mediterranean, and the DASH diet. And there were a lot of ways I could have done this, but simply put, I underlined the ones that these 2 diets have in common with the MIND diet, because we talked about how they have just meshed together, these 2 diets. So if you take all of the underlined things and you mesh them together, you can kind of see the things that we just talked about for the MIND diet. Vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, things like that, while limiting, red meat, added sugars, refined grains, and that kind of thing. Next slide. So we talked about the MIND diet. Now let's talk specifically about macronutrients, sorry. I created this graphic because we all kind of know carbs, protein, and fat, but it's harder to visualize the things that overlap. Some things have both carbs and protein, or both protein and fat. So I mentioned beans and lentils and legumes and things like that are going to be a good protein source, but they're also a carb. And then there's an overlap with, the fatty fish and eggs and occasional cheese with protein and fats. It just depends what kind of fat. Cheese is going to be a little more saturated, and eggs and fish are going to have a little more of those unsaturated fats. Next slide, please. So generally speaking, and I say generally very specifically because we all are different. Everybody needs a kind of different ratio of food, and one diet doesn't fit every person. One eating lifestyle doesn't fit every person. But generally speaking, the proportion of macronutrients that we can talk about is half of our intake of foods from carbs, because there's a lot of parts of your body that just run on carbs. Your brain is one of them. The other 20% and 30% are from protein and fat, respectively. So there's kind of a range for all 3 of those you can see, but 50, 20, 30 is a little easier to remember. I also always like to say, try to get a mixture of all 3 with each meal and snack. It's just going to keep you more sustained longer. So instead of reaching for a bowl of cereal with milk, maybe reach for oatmeal with nuts and peanut butter and berries and that kind of thing. Seeds you can throw in there too. So that's going to kind of keep you fuller longer. That's just kind of a tip that I share with pretty much anybody about how to, manage your carbs, your macros, your protein, and your fat, and to stay fuller longer. Next slide. So as we age, that balance of macronutrients is going to change. That's why I said generally, Babies and children need more fat to support growth because they're constantly growing, right? Older adults, as we get older, we need more protein to prevent muscle loss, because for every decade after we turn 30, we lose between 3 and 8% of our muscle mass if we don't actively fight that. So that's why we need to focus on protein, as well as the few other nutrients that we'll talk about in a second. There's also, as we age, a decrease in hunger and thirst cues. Sometimes it's just not easy to tell when you're hungry, not as easy to tell when you're thirsty. There's also a decrease in calorie needs. You know, we aren't as active. We don't need as much to keep going, you know. There is an increased need for other nutrients, like I mentioned, protein, but also vitamin B12, vitamin D, and calcium. Next slide. So vitamin B12 is absorbed in our stomach, but as we get older, the substance that helps absorb vitamin B12, which is called intrinsic factor, it stops being produced as readily. So vitamin B12 doesn't get absorbed as well as we get older. So that's why I always recommend for my older clients to take a B12 supplement and emphasize these foods. So fish and seafood, like we mentioned earlier, nutritional yeast, if you are a vegan, it can add a lot of all of the B vitamins, and it has a really good, like, cheesy or meaty texture. Organ meats, dairy, eggs, and fortified plant-based milks also, if you're lactose intolerant or anything. Vitamin D and calcium are both going to be important for bones as we get older. And protein is for those muscles. So vitamin D, you're going to want to focus on dark leafy greens, fatty fish, egg yolk, mushrooms, dairy, fortified milk, fortified plant-based milk, and fortified cereals. Calcium, dark leafy greens, soy, fish, and seafood, low-fat dairy, seeds, nuts, some fruits, and fortified things. And then protein, we kind of talked about proteins already, but those poultry, fish, seafood, any plant-based things like beans, mushrooms, occasional red meat. Next slide. So another important thing I like to mention to anybody, but specifically as we get older, is hydration. It's kind of the part of nutrition and overall health that we don't really talk about a lot. The recommendation is 8 cups a day or 64 ounces. And I recommend carrying a water bottle with you wherever you go. Right now, you might want to put some ice cubes in it because it's really been hot outside. But keeping one with you will help you remember to drink. And I recommend also drinking a glass within an hour of waking up. You don't have to chug that whole thing as soon as you wake up, because water on an empty stomach can be kind of irritating. But just kind of sipping it as you're waking up, because we do exhale around 2 liters of water every night. That's why you wake up kind of groggy and dehydrated. Things that can dehydrate are anything with caffeine is a diuretic. Alcohol is also a diuretic. So not going to tell you to stop drinking coffee, but just make sure you're also drinking water while you're drinking coffee or tea, because those things are going to make you have to go to the bathroom more and you're losing water. High sodium foods also, you might notice if you're eating soup or something, or pizza maybe, that you're very thirsty all of a sudden. So just make sure you have water with you then. And then right now, this one's probably the most important. If you're outside, if you're walking, if you're gardening, please take a water bottle with you. It is so hot outside, and it's just really easy to get dehydrated faster than you think right now. So keep that water bottle with you. And Dr. Sanjay Gupta talks about how just 2% dehydration has a measurable impact on your memory, your processing speed, and your analytical thinking. So hydration is also really good for that brain health, like we've been talking about. Next. And finally, we're going to end with supplements. I always include this slide in any PowerPoint where I'm talking about supplements, because supplements are not regulated by the FDA. What does that mean? That means that they have to review all new ingredients used. So if they're making a supplement that's got something in it that's never been in a supplement before, they have to make sure that that is safe for human consumption. However, they don't make sure that what's on the label is in the packaging. that kind of thing. So the manufacturer is responsible for being like, this is what's on our label and this is what's in our product. And these three companies are third party, meaning they're not related to the supplement brands. And they have taken supplements off the shelves and tested them. And they have found that some supplements have completely different ingredients in them or different quantities than what's specified on the label, which is really disheartening because a lot of times the reason we're taking a supplement is to cover gaps that might be in our diet. So how can you shop smart? How can you prevent this issue? Just check for one of these labels on the bottle. I see the middle one quite often, but specifically at like Walmart or Kroger or somewhere, a lot of things there have NSF or USP. I occasionally see Consumer Lab. You can also go to their websites and check while you're shopping online for a new supplement. You can look, I think you search like USP or one of these things, supplement verification list, and it will show you a list of the supplements that have been verified by them. Also, just know that if you look at your supplements and you don't see one of these, that doesn't mean that it's bad. That doesn't mean you have a bad supplement. It just means that we don't know yet. They're constantly testing and verifying new supplements. So yours could be totally fine and they just haven't gotten to it yet. But next time you're in the market, I would just double check if there's one of these labels on there. So 3 takeaways from today. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time, but the first thing that we talked about was how even moderate consumption of foods on the MIND diet has been shown to slow and prevent cognitive decline and even Alzheimer's. And if you don't have the list of foods, you can find them online, the MIND diet. You can just search it and it'll show up what kind of foods that you need to emphasize. Number 2, nutrient needs do change as we age. Older adults need more protein, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and calcium, and often fewer calories. But just make sure you're eating when you're hungry. If you're feeling hungry, get a snack. And 3, supplements can help us meet our nutrient needs if there is a gap, but choosing a third-party verified supplement can ensure that you get what you pay for. And if you want more information on nutrition, want to talk to a dietitian, the virtual nutrition counseling program at the YMCA launched a couple months ago, and you don't even have to leave your house. We can set up a Zoom call. We also have a 3 for $99 bundle. If you're wanting to get just a few in and dip your toes in nutrition, you can go to that website there or search nutrition counseling at YMCA of Middle Tennessee. Or you can email me at nbarnett@ymcamidtn.org. And those are my sources. Thank you all so much.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Amanda Myers. I have my PhD is in family sciences, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I actually wear 2 hats. I am the bariatric support group leader at St. Thomas Rutherford in their bariatric program. And I am also a therapist for Insight Counseling Centers, which is a Middle Tennessee-based nonprofit as well. So today I'm going to be, Natalie, I just did the same thing. I went to go switch my slides. So slide, please. Today I am going to be talking about family recipes, and it's really in the context of what gets passed down. Now, one of the terms in family systems theory is called this intergenerational transmission of risk. So what I want you to think about is I want you to think about your parents, and then you, and then your children. Okay, so we got three generations here. Kind of think of it like a funnel. So it started with your parents, then you joined, and then your children. So we've got family of origin, we've got family of procreation. So really, intergenerational transmission of risk is what gets transmitted, what trickles down from above, ends up hitting all of us in the here and now and in the present. So it's important to recognize what are some things that we're at risk for genetically. So identifying the risk. I heard it said before, what are you genetically loaded for? So we've heard that people have a predisposition for alcoholism if there's alcoholism in their family history. Okay. Some people, breast cancer. If you've got a blood relative with breast cancer, you are more than likely genetically loaded for it. But just because you're genetically loaded for it does not mean that your DNA determines your outcomes. Because in all of that, we have nature, but we also have nurture. So nurture are our behaviors. So I've heard it said that we are genetically loaded for things, but our behaviors pull the trigger. So it's important to think about what behaviors are you engaging in that may pull a trigger, right? So when we've just heard from Natalie about nutrition, how we eat started in our family of origin at the top of that funnel. I had a professor who was a dietitian, and she said, no one eats in isolation, meaning growing up. Yes, some of us were latchkey kids and we had to take care of ourselves and ate, at home alone, but there was still someone bringing that food into the house. So how we came to understand anything about food was from our caregivers. So it's important to consider, again, the health of your family. What are you at risk for? But also, what are you currently doing that could give you a poor outcome? I was really convicted when Natalie said, limit your sweets to 4 times a week, 4 or less. I'm 2 weeks away from having a baby. And I'm like, sweets, wow, like 4 times a week, that'd be a great goal. I'm lucky right now to 4 times a day. But you can see where those sweets actually inflame your body and they inflame your brain. And I didn't say this before, but I know I said I worked in the bariatric program. What that is it's surgical weight loss. And so our patients have to really shift how they eat and how they view nutrition. Some of them have never read a label before, and some of them are really organized around having better health when they become grandparents. They're like, okay, like I've done enough damage now. I want to live and I want to stay around for my grandkids and I want to be able to take them places. And so they start to really track their food and notice what's going on. And they go for high protein because that's what happens. We want you to get more protein than anything else. And they start to realize their body temperature is going down. They're like, I'm cold all the time, even though I haven't lost a ton of weight yet. Well, that's because your body's not inflamed. You're not on those bad carbohydrates and all the sugary things. You're not just drinking your calories with sweet tea and all the things. And so they notice in their bodies that their body starts responding. And as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I also notice that people's moods start responding as well. When your body's not inflamed, it gets better signals going on to your brain, and you're not riding that cycle of sugars going up and then going down, going up and going down. So we learn about this from our family of origin, whether we realize it or not. So one of my points here is that it's important to work towards untangling destructive messaging about food, because so often we might have grown up in an environment where food equaled love, or you had a bad day, let's go get ice cream, or you made an A on your report card, let's have a pizza party. There's so many rewards around food. And when you pair those together, it takes a while, again, like I said, to untangle them. When my daughter turned 1, I was not that parent. She's 3 now. I was not that parent that wanted to have the smash cake because I have a sugar addiction and my husband's type 1 diabetic. And so I'm thinking about what's getting pushed, transmitted down to her. And my mom and my aunt could not believe that all I had for her was one little cupcake with no icing. It just blew their minds. And I heard about it. I heard about it several times afterwards. I can't believe that baby didn't have any icing on her first birthday. But where I came from thinking about it was that's kind of cruel to do to a child because their diet is nothing but milk the first 4 months of life. And then you start eventually adding in some, purees and it's a slow progression. And at 12 months is when they can actually drink, cow's milk for the first time. And you're not so worried about eggs and honey and all the things. Why would I burst her system with all this sugar and this junk? So I had to put that aside and the people pleasing in my life and just say, what is best for my daughter? But it did come with some resistance. But I didn't want that for her. I didn't want her to have the smash cake and just going for it as a 12-month-old. That just didn't seem right to me. By the way, Tennessee was at one point the #1 state for pediatric obesity. Okay. So that is not that child's fault. That is on us. That is on this generation and this generation. Okay. We've been at one point #1. We've been number 6. I think currently we're number 4. That's not okay. So part of aging well is realizing, what did I do growing up that I really don't need to pass down? All right. So again, we work on untangling destructive messages about food, what needs to stay in the past, what needs to be brought forward. It's also important to consider your legacy of home, heart, and habits. Okay, so what are you passing down? What are you currently living in? What's your present situation? But what are you passing down to the people around you or younger than you? This legacy of home. What does home look like? Are we sitting and eating at the table together? Or are we just buying our food out in a restaurant? Are we cooking together? Are they seeing meal prep? Your tone in your home is also part of a heart condition as well. Our emotions and our spirit. And a lot of that is influenced by what we're eating, and we're not even realizing it. And then our habits, like I said, do you eat at the table? Do you eat on the couch? Do you eat every time you feel hunger? Natalie said, eat a snack if you feel hungry. Well, if you have the disease of obesity, you're hungry probably all the time. And so you've got to be able to differentiate between a head hunger and a physical hunger. So those are just some ideas, and just to consider that no one eats in isolation. So if you haven't gotten it, quote unquote, right up until this point, that's okay. Because what we know about the brain is that there's neuroplasticity. We can create new things no matter how old we are, new neuro pathways. And so much of that starts with nutrition, but also we're in the South, and our context is that so much of our traditions and emotions are tangled up with food. So you got to be able to untangle that. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what are you passing down? It's important to think about what's been passed down to you, but then what are you passing down? That's, again, part of aging well. Intergenerational transmission of risk, what we just talked about, that can be addiction, that can be divorce, that can be obesity, any of those vices, those habits, all right? So family rituals or mealtime, that is something that gets passed down. When I started leading weight loss surgery support groups, I was shocked at how many people did not eat at the table. it is so important that your kitchen table is actually for eating your food. That is where you can be mindful. That is where you can eat more slowly. And that is where you can connect with whoever's around you. And if you're single and by yourself, that's where you can connect with God. You can have body awareness. You can appreciate and enjoy your food rather than just shoveling it in or being super mindless. So being intentional, not just about what you eat, but how you eat, is also very important. Role expectations. So I know for me growing up, whenever we went to either one of my grandmother's houses, my brother and I would always come back bigger. My mom said our cheeks would just be so puffy. I mean, grandma's house was designed to spoil you, but we weren't going there every single day. You know, it was 2 or 3 times a year, and that's okay. But a lot of grandparents right now are serving as caregivers for their grandchildren. You know, they're in that sandwich generation that they talk about, where they're still caring a little bit for their parents, but they're also caring for their children and their grandchildren. It's a, you know, it's an interesting time. So I know for my daughter, she's at my mom's house 3 or 4 times a week at least. And so if she wanted to be the grandmother that's spoiled, that's a lot of access to poor nutrition right there. So you have to consider, you know, what are your roles? Are your, you know, grandchildren or nieces and nephews, the younger generations that are coming to your home, how often do they come? And do you want to be the fluffy grandma? Is that who you want to be? Do you want to be the one that just, you know, teaches your grandkids how to binge eat? Because that was my experience, is I learned how to just binge. And yes, it was just very obvious when we would come home, the size of our cheeks. Health is also really important in terms of what you're passing down. Are you practicing good self-care? Are you making those appointments to learn about nutrition? Are you following up with your primary care physician? Do you have supportive nutrition? That's a language shift, because sometimes we look at nutrition as either good or bad. But I really have been trying lately to shift that and say, is this supportive nutrition or unsupportive? Is this going to help my brain, or is it going to inflame it? Movement is also important for health, and then having some coping skills around it. So good nutrition can be a coping skill. Having some movement can be a coping skill. You know, taking a walk, journaling. I think I have one other slide on some coping skills. Resources. So what are you passing down? Are you passing down some financial resources, some educational, some spiritual? So again, you think about what's been passed down to you, and then what you're also passing down. And then goals. You know, are the people around you seeing you working towards something? Like I said, our brain, it's neuroplasticity. And I don't know if y'all noticed Natalie's slide, but that first slide, it looked like a brain. It's actually a walnut. And walnuts are really good for our brains. So what are you working towards? Are you working towards better nutrition? Are you learning a new skill, like cooking with olive oil, using an air fryer? Are there parts of your life that you're looking to transform, or are you just sedentary and just, this is who I've always been, and this is what I'll always do. This is who I'll always be. So these are some questions to consider in how you're aging. You can be an active participant in the way that you age, and it's your decision whether you're going to age well or just deteriorate. So we're either going forward or backwards. All right, next slide. So problematic passing, right? Because we're talking about what we pass down. I had a therapist tell me what does not get transformed gets transferred. So if you have struggled with some disordered eating, maybe food is your only coping mechanism, maybe it's your source of pleasure or reward, okay? Perhaps you're a volume eater, and every meal you think you need to get Thanksgiving full. Perhaps you're a binge eater, and there's a certain food that when you are feeling really emotional and flooded, you just eat a whole row of Oreo cookies. I mean, I think an Oreo cookie, the serving size is like 2. Like who's ever had 2 Oreos? So, but a binge is, you know, eating half of that box of donuts or that whole, you know, that pint of ice cream. You're just out of control. And then there's also closet eating. You know, some of us knew that our moms ate in secret. You know, they bury the wrappers or they eat in their cars. Some of us do that. So that's some problematic passing. And then there's disordered thinking. Some of my patients tell them that their moms especially said food is your best friend. You know, it'll never let you down. It'll always be there. You deserve a treat. You can start your diet on Monday. You know, just that, putting all that off. And we also live in a diet culture of feast or famine. You know, it's so extreme. That's what I really appreciate about Natalie's presentation is like, it's all coming to midline. let's just get right in the middle and not this feast or famine, all or nothing, extremes. And we are living in extreme times because 1 out of 3 adults is overweight or obese. I mean, that's a lot. So another thing to consider, like I said before, is your language. You think about something as being helpful or not helpful, supportive or not supportive. A problematic passing, or in your current context, have you found yourself saying, I don't really care about helpful nutrition at my age because it's too late and it doesn't matter? It's not too late and it does matter. It is not too late and it does matter. So let's just go ahead and throw that message away. It's not too late and it does matter. And you can do and learn new things and you can feel better. All right, next slide, please. So we got to consider the cost, okay? Aging well looks like adding more protein to your diet. It looks like staying hydrated. You don't wait till you're thirsty, because if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. It looks like seeking out community, like coming to talks like this and going to the YMCA and having, you know, as the kids call it these days, a tribe, you know, a bocce group or a bingo group, something like. You seek out community in your church and where you live. You work on changing you, not others, because you think about what's been funneled down to you and what you're funneling down, and the only person you can really change is you. So focus on you. Find comfort in doing rather than consuming extra calories. You know, the older we get, sometimes the lonelier we get. Our schedules aren't as full as they once were, or maybe our kids or grandkids or neighbors or whatever, we don't have the same connections that we once did. And so some of us get bored or depressed and we just consume extra calories. And I would encourage you not to do that, you know, because it's you need to do things. And that's why I have that self-care menu. Recognize food and mood connections. You are what you eat. That's true. True story. You are what you eat. You feel how you eat. All right. And then maintain your weight. Added pounds impact you physically and mentally, no matter how old you are. My grandmother's 88 and has vascular dementia right now, and she still talks about her weight. And I really need to lose 10 pounds. And it's just like, wow, that is never goes away. So staying committed and clued in will really help with that. And so we'll adding protein. So self-care menu: take a walk, call a friend, talk with a therapist, listen to music, read, journal, light a candle. I've even got a candle right here at my desk. Stretch your body, get some fresh air, declutter your space. You can see I'm in my garage right now. It's very cluttered. So some people have catch-all tables. We have a catch-all room here in our garage, but decluttering it will help you feel so much better. Cook a delicious, nutritious meal, something that you can say, that feels better. Not, I need to go lay down. I ate too much. I need to sleep. All right. So those are just some ideas, and just consider the cost. Everything you're doing does matter. Okay. I think that's the end for me. Next slide. Yeah, that's the end. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Natalie and Amanda. And now we're going to ask Audrey to share about her story and what she has learned just living life about eating well to age well. Audrey?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I do not have any slides, but I just want to share again. I'm now approaching in November 82. And at age 50, just so happened I was identified as having Marfan's and I had heart surgery. So actually, I went to Texas, had the heart surgery, came back, continued my work at the VA, and I just going like an old car. I just feel like an old car. So I've enjoyed all of your presentations and I've taken notes, and so much of what you said, I have one daughter that's a chef and she tells me all the time, both of them live out of the city in DC, and she'll say, Mama, are you getting enough protein? I know you're not. So she sends me food in the mail for soups. As you age, one thing, your appetite is not as it was earlier, because, and I now remember my mother said, I'm not as active and I just don't have the appetite. And now I understand what she was saying, because I don't get hungry, but I know there are things that I have to do, keep moving, and I must eat. Now, I do belong to the YMCA, and I don't always go on schedule as I should, at least twice a week, but I do have the membership, and I have friends that we call each other and encourage, to go. Right now, it's too hot outside to just walk. So therefore, our exercising must be done inside. But I have certainly enjoyed all of your messages, and I have taken note. And it's so important as we age, aging well. I just feel like, Grace, this is such a great topic. I had been volunteering on Council on Aging, but now it's aging well. So there are a couple of things that I know that I must do: eat healthy, exercise, and stay active. Now, the other thing that is starting to bother me a little bit, I told my daughter, and that's the memory. As I'm coming upon 82, we don't always pull up and remember as we have in the past. But I'm a note taker. So I keep a little pad or something to make notes and write down. I do take my vitamins, but I know staying active is one of the things that helps us in terms of our memory too. But eating healthy, exercising, staying active, and not being just always cooped up. As we age, we have a tendency to just say, oh, I don't feel like going anywhere. I just want to lay around. But I'm going to tell you, the older I get, the more I have to push myself. And actually, a friend gave me a jumping rope, and I said, hey, I can still jump rope. Hey. And I didn't fall. So, but thank you for including me in this session. And it just encourages me, as some of the ladies that are older than I there at the Y, just encouraged to keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Audrey, thank you. And before we go on, I just want to invite anyone that has a question, feel free to put that in the chat or in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll ask the panelists your question. But I have a question just to get us started. before we talk about resources, and it's something, Audrey, that you said, and I'm curious to have Natalie respond to this. It just seems like it can be tricky as we age if our hunger and our thirst cues are not what they used to be. How do we compensate for that to make sure that we're drinking enough water and we're eating well throughout the day to age well? Do you have any tips about that? Because that was something new that I've learned today.
Absolutely. Well, for drinking, first of all, like I said, just keeping a bottle or a glass of water in your eyesight around you, like if you're sitting at home or if you're going somewhere, I always carry, you've probably seen me drink out of this a few times. It's everywhere. Everywhere I am. I move, if I leave this room, I take it with me. And I see Amanda drinking now. Every time I talk about drinking, I see people on my calls drinking water. But just keeping something visible, if you see it, you're going to drink it more. So that's a good way to keep hydrated. As far as eating, that kind of mentality also works. But if you're just somebody who, your hunger cues are kind of going away, you could kind of do it on like a timeline thing. Be like, it's been a few hours since I've eaten. Maybe I should eat again. Or you could just really pack in some calories, like make things calorically dense. A lot of times when I was working at the nursing home, that's what we would do for patients who maybe weren't eating enough or weren't, getting enough in one meal. We would either increase their frequency of their meals. We would give them snacks more often throughout the day, or we would just put them on what we called S&P, which is supplemental nutrition program. And they would just like add cheese to stuff or add, more higher fat milk, things like that. I would recommend that for everyone, obviously, if you're still doing well on hunger cues. But if you can't, if you don't feel hungry and you might notice you're dropping weight, you don't really want to get too underweight or anything. So that's when I would recommend kind of doing something like that. There are one specific thing, I know this is a really long answer, but one specific thing that I've noticed in stores is the Kodiak brand, like oats and stuff, they have protein added to them. So that it's the carbs and the protein. So stuff like that you can find that has protein and fat kind of added into it is a really good thing to eat. It keeps you fuller a lot longer. So.
That's helpful. So what I heard you say too was rather than focusing on 3 meals a day and big meals, that it is acceptable. We might have smaller meals or snacks more frequently if we don't have a big appetite, say.
Absolutely. A lot of people, they call that grazing. That's kind of a thing. Some people are very firmly 3 square meals a day. And some people, I myself am included, kind of just eat here and there. I might have a smoothie and then make some eggs and then kind of, grab some nuts or, chips and hummus or something like that just throughout the day. So that could be something that can help too. If you're not really feeling that hunger, you can just have like a little something here and then maybe a couple hours later have a little something here, something like that. So just kind of keeping variety and frequency is really important. So that's a great recommendation.
Thank you. I'm seeing a comment in our Q&A. Someone that's attending is a service coordinator in an independent living facility, and she would like to know if any of the panelists are available to give presentations. Is that something you do in the community?
We do through Insight Counseling Centers. We have some webinars available. I am not committing to anything else for the rest of the year. So we've got baby coming in 2 weeks, but it could be something that I might be available to do come January. But Insight Counseling Centers does offer webinars and presentations as well.
We also work, we're kind of starting to branch out and do some workshops and presentations. I've done cooking demos and things like that. I just have to get it approved through my supervisor. But that's something that we're kind of playing with the idea of. So we would be open to it, absolutely.
Great, thank you. And I think, Amanda, as you said, this webinar today is being recorded. And it certainly could be played for a group in your community, and use that as a catalyst for conversation about nutrition and eating and ways we think about food, et cetera. So we welcome that option as well. One of the things that I think we're all feeling these days is the pinch of rising cost. Gas has gone up, groceries have gone up. I'm always shocked when I check out at the grocery how much more food seems to cost these days. And we know that as we get older and we're living on a fixed income, it can be really challenging to be able to afford your food and your medication and the things you need. So one thing we wanted to do in today's webinar is just share some resources that are in the community for anyone that may need some assistance in stretching their income to be able to afford healthy foods. There are food pantries available, Second Harvest Food Bank. There are mobile food pantries that are listed here, and also home delivered meals and Meals on Wheels that are available if it's difficult for you to get out of your home, or if you're caring for a loved one that has difficulty going to the store or preparing meals. Home delivered meals are a wonderful option. And there are several organizations in Davidson County and other counties that provide home delivered meals or Meals on Wheels. So we would just wanted to share those resources with you. All of these resources are listed in AgeWell's Directory of Services, which is available at any public library, free for older adults and family caregivers. So we encourage you to get a copy of the directory if you don't have one. The other thing we wanted to tell you about is the SNAP program. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is available to provide nutritional assistance to children, families, older adults, persons with disabilities, to help pay for food, to help you when you're buying groceries. And you can apply for SNAP through the Department of Human Services. And if you're an older adult, you can receive assistance in applying for SNAP through the Tennessee Justice Center. So we wanted to share that with you. SNAP can be one way to help stretch your monthly income to be able to afford food and to be able to afford the other things you need. Next slide, please. I'm going to look real quick to see, I don't see any new questions for our panel. And we are almost near the end of our time. I just want to thank our panelists again for the wonderful information they've shared. We will post this webinar on our website. So if you want to watch it again, if you'd like to share it with a friend, it will be available on the AgeWell website. Just so much good information for all of us, I think, in really understanding what foods are preferable, how important it is to drink water and stay hydrated, but also, Amanda, you really brought forth the mental health aspects of food and how we think about food, our lifestyle habits and how important they are. And Audrey, you helped it stay real just in sharing your own experience and the importance of staying active and eating well, and even when you may not feel like being active or eating something. So thank you all to our panelists. I want to invite you, we will be having additional webinars in the coming months. Our next webinar will be focused on brain health, and then we'll have one on mental health, financial well-being, and spirituality and living with purpose. All of the upcoming webinars will be on AgeWell's website under our upcoming events. And again, we want to thank our sponsors for this series, GNRC, as well as Ascension St. Thomas and Kroger, for sponsoring today's webinar. Next slide, please. Again, I want to thank you on behalf of our team at AgeWell Middle Tennessee. Please visit us, call us if we can be of assistance. If you don't have a copy of our Directory of Services, we hope you will get one at your local library. And please reach out if we can ever be of assistance to you or a family member. If you're a caregiver, we also offer support to family caregivers. So again, Natalie, Amanda, Audrey, thank you so much for being with us today. And thanks to all of you who joined our webinar.